Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Let's listen to this hadith.
This hadith you've quoted is a well-known narration from Sunan ibn Majah, hadith number 1944, and it touches upon a sensitive and often discussed topic in Islamic scholarship, verses that were revealed but later abrogated in recitation. Here's a breakdown of the hadith Arabic narration, open quote. قالت لقد نزلت آية الرجم ورضاعة الكبير 10 ولقد كان في صحيفة تحت سريري فلما مات رسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم وتشاغل بموته دخل داجن أكلها. Close quote. Close quote. Open quote. Aisha radiallahu anha said, the verse of stoning and the breastfeeding of an adult 10 times was revealed, and it was written on a paper under my bed. When the Messenger of Allah died, we were preoccupied with his death, and a tame sheep came in and ate it. Close quote. Important points to understand. 1. Verse of stoning, ayat al-rajm. The ruling of stoning for married adulterers is confirmed through mutawatir hadith, mass-transmitted hadiths, and practiced in the early Islamic period. Although it was once a Quranic verse, the recitation was abrogated, but the ruling remained. 2. Breastfeeding of an adult. This refers to a controversial issue where a woman could breastfeed a grown man in specific, rare legal contexts to establish mahram, non-marriageable status. While Aisha upheld this practice based on direct instruction from the Prophet of Allah, the majority of scholars limited its application or abrogated it. 3. The sheep eating the verse. This part of the hadith is often misunderstood. It does not imply that rulings were lost due to a sheep eating the paper. Rather, it illustrates how Allah's will for certain verses to be abrogated in recitation came to be, even if they had once been physically recorded. The preservation of the Quran was always by memorization and mass transmission, not solely dependent on any one physical copy. Scholarly notes. Grading, Hassan, according to Dar es Salaam. Narrators, the chain is considered acceptable though not at the highest level of authenticity like Sahih al-Bukhari or Muslim. Abrogation, Naskh. Islamic scholars differentiate between Naskh al-Tilawa, abrogation of recitation, the verse is no longer part of the Quran. Naskh al-Hukm, abrogation of ruling, the verse remains, but the ruling is no longer applicable. This hadith shows Naskh al-Tilawa without Naskh al-Hukm for rajm, stoning. Conclusion. This hadith is significant for discussions on abrogation, Quranic preservation, and jurisprudential rulings. It does not imply any imperfection in the Quran's preservation, but rather shows how abrogation was part of divine wisdom during the compilation and finalization of the Quran. Let me know if you want further scholarly commentary or context from tafsir or fiqh sources. Certainly. Let's dive deeper into this hadith in light of Quranic preservation, abrogation, and Islamic scholarship, focusing on the two key topics in the hadith, stoning, rajm, and adult breastfeeding and their relation to the Quran. Context, Quran, hadith, and revelation. 1. What is revelation, wahi, in Islam? In Islam, revelation came to the Prophet Muhammad in two main forms. Quran, the literal word of Allah, recited in prayers and compiled as the Mushaf, Sunan, Hadith, Qudsi, and Nabawi, the Prophet's inspired teachings, not part of the Quran, but equally important in legislation. So, not all revelation was meant to be part of the Quran. This distinction helps us understand why something may have been revealed, but not preserved as part of the recited Quran. The Hadith and its content. Hadith summary, Sunan ibn Majah 1944, Aisha and the breastfeeding of an adult 10 times was revealed, and it was written on a paper under my pillow. When the Prophet died, we were preoccupied with his death, and a tame sheep came and ate it. Close quote. Abrogation, Naskh in the Quran. Abrogation was a divine process explained in the Quran itself. Open quote, whatever verse we abrogate or cause to be forgotten, we bring a better one or similar to it. Surah al-Baqarah, 2, close quote. So Allah sometimes abrogated the recitation and the ruling, Abrogated only the recitation but kept the ruling. Abrogated only the ruling but kept the verse in the Quran. 1. Verse of stoning, Ayat al-Gham. What was the verse? According to Umar ibn al-Khattab and other Sahaba. Open quote. The married man and woman, if they commit adultery, stone them to death as a punishment from Allah. Close quote. Open quote. الشيخ والشيخة إذا زنيا فرجموهم البتة نكالا من الله والله عزيز حكيم. Close quote. Is this verse in the Quran? No, it is not found in the present Mushaf, but its ruling is established by mutawatir hadith, mass-transmitted narrations. Evidence from Umar ibn al-Khattab, 16:830. Umar said, open quote, if people say, we do not find the punishment of stoning in the book of Allah, then I say, I saw the messenger of Allah stoning, and we stoned after him, close quote. Thus, the verse was abrogated in recitation, but its ruling was preserved and implemented. Manash 2, adult breastfeeding. Rida'at al-Kabild, open quote, breastfeeding of an adult 10 times, close quote. Later, this was reportedly abrogated to 5 times, as per authentic narrations. This means the woman had to breastfeed an adult 5 times to make him mahram, non-marriageable, but this was specific to one case, Salim, the freed slave of Abu Hudhaifa. Open quote, narrated by Muslim, Hadith 453, Aisha said, this was revealed in the Quran, 10 known breastfeedings make marriage unlawful. Then it was abrogated to 5 known ones. Close quote. This verse too was abrogated in recitation, and eventually the ruling was limited and specific, not universal. About the sheep eating the verse. Some people mock or misunderstand this part. Here's what scholars clarify. 1. Preservation of Quran was never dependent on individual manuscripts. It was memorized en masse by Sahaba. 2. The fact that a sheep ate a piece of parchment does not mean the verse was lost. It had already been abrogated. 3. This event simply shows Aisha's emotional reflection on how these revelations were present and known, but not recorded in the final Mushaf due to divine will. Quran preservation versus abrogation. Open quote. Indeed, it is we who sent down the Quran, and indeed we will be its guardian. Surah Al-Hijr 59, close quote. This verse assures divine preservation, and that includes preserving only what was meant to be permanent. Verses like the ones about stoning or adult breastfeeding were abrogated as part of that preservation, not in contradiction to it. Final reflection. Stoning and breastfeeding verses were revealed but intentionally abrogated in recitation. Their rulings were known through hadith and practice, not the Quranic text. The Quran we have today is exactly what Allah intended to remain. The incident of the sheep eating the paper is simply part of the narrative of how Allah chose to preserve and structure His final revelation. Would you like tafsir from classical scholars like Imam Qurtubi, Ibn Kathir, or al-Shawkani on this topic? I can pull specific commentary from them too. Here's a deeper look into the abrogated verses mentioned in the Hadith, drawing on tafsir and scholarly sources. Number Shar 1. The verse on adult breastfeeding, Rada'at al-Kabir. What was revealed and then abrogated? A verse stipulating that 10 clear sucklings from a woman would establish a mahram relationship, prohibition of marriage, was revealed. This was later abrogated in wording but not in ruling, replaced by a verse limiting the number to 5 known breastfeeding sessions. Cite Turj 3, Turn Search 9, Muslim. According to Sahih 52, Aisha said this changing verse was still being recited by some at the time of the Prophet's death, unaware it had been abrogated. Cite, turn, search 3 through. How do tafsir and fatwa literature explain this? Islam Web Royal Al-Bait affirms that this verse had been abrogated both in recitation and in legal application. Cite, turn, search 1, turn, search 0. A fatwa explains that the final wording 5 sucklings was still on people's lips due to the lateness of the decree, illustrating the timing of abrogation. Cite, turn, search 3. What do classical jurists say? The majority of jurists, including Imam Malik al-Shafi'i, Abu Hanifa, and Abdullah ibn Umar, rejected the concept of adult breastfeeding, establishing mahram beyond the 2-year nursing period specified in the Quran. Cite, turn, search 6, turn, search 5, turn, search 7. Hamshar 2, the verse on stoning, Rajam. What was its status? According to Ibn Majah 1944, a verse prescribing stoning of married adulterers was revealed and, like the breastfeeding verse, recorded on paper, which was later eaten. Although the verse was abrogated in recitation, its ruling continued unchanged. Sinai turn search 10, church, turn search 0. Contemporary understanding. Islam Web clarifies that the stoning verse is not erased from Islamic law because it is preserved through mutawatir hadith, mass-transmitted narrations, and the practice of the companions. Cite, turn, search 0. 3. How does this relate to the Quran's preservation? Abrogation. Nask al-Tilawa, as specified in the Quran itself, 2:106, involves Allah replacing earlier verses with later ones, sometimes improving clarity or specificity. The verses in question were abrogated in recitation per divine wisdom, but the rulings remained valid, especially for stoning, as preserved by the Prophet's sunnah and lived practice. Cite, turn, search, 5th search, 0. Quran 15 verse 9 emphasizes that Allah himself has guaranteed the preservation of the Quran, but that includes preserving only that which Allah intended to remain, not every intermediate revelation. Number 4. Tafsir and scholarly commentary. Tafsir al-Qurtubi, Ibn Kathir, while neither contain a Quranic verse string for these issues, both discuss abrogation extensively in relation to Nask, explaining that the process was gradual and served divine wisdom. Ibn Kathir cites that abrogated verses are replaced or refined. Cite, turn search 4 Sunan, Islam Shafi'i perspective, consistently holds that fostering via adult breastfeeding does not establish a mahram relationship beyond infancy and emphasizes the 2-year maximum nursing rule. Cite, turn search, summary. Topic, initial verse, abrogated, replacement, abrogated verse, ruling status, prohibit marriage. Adult breastfeeding. 10 known sucklings prohibit marriage. 5 known sucklings prohibit abrogated. Ruling maintained, mostly limited. Stoning, Rajam, verse prescribing stoning, none, abrogated entirely. Ruling preserved through sunnah and practice. Final reflections. These abrogated verses illustrate a process within divine guidance, not a flaw. The preservation of the Quran refers to what Allah intended to remain in permanent form. Stoning, though no longer recited, remains legislatively valid. Adult breastfeeding was restricted and context-specific, largely limited to the case of Salim, and ultimately abrogated in both text and penalty. The mushaf we have today reflects what Allah intended for permanent recitation, and every ruling is either present there or preserved through sunnah and hadith. If you'd like, I can pull specific commentary from Ibn Kathir or Qurtubi by chapter that mentions Nask on these issues. Here's a more detailed view of what tafsir scholars say about the abrogated verses mentioned in the Hadith, specifically in relation to stoning, rajam, and adult breastfeeding. 1. Tafsir on the verse of adult breastfeeding. Narration overview. Aisha, radiyallahu anha, reported, open quote, 10 definite breastfeedings were revealed in the Quran to establish mahram status, Then it was abrogated and replaced by 5 known sucklings. When the Prophet ﷺ died, it was still among what was being recited as Quran. Cite, turn, search, third turn, search, 8 turn, search, 6 turn, search, 6 Sunan, close quote. These versions, particularly through Yahya ibn Sa'id and Amra, do not mention the sheep eating the page. Those details appear only in weaker narrations. Cite, turn, search, and search 16. What tafsir scholars say. Imam Nawawi, citing a commentary on Sahih Muslim, explains that the late revelation of the 5 suckle ruling caused some companions to continue reciting the previous 10 suckle form, unaware of the abrogation until very late. Site, Terfern, Search 9i, Seeker's Guidance, Sheikh Abdul Rahim Riyasat, notes that this kind of abrogation, where the wording is changed but the legal ruling remains, is well accepted, and that the companions did not act as if the 10 sucklings remained in the final Quran. Cite, turn, search 9. Ibn al-Tahawi, al-Jassas, and Ibn al-Arabi regard the narration that includes the extra wording, the Messenger passed away while it was being recited, as a later addition by narrators, not part of Isha's own wording. Turn, search. 2. Tafsir on the verse of stoning, Rajam. Narration overview. The same hadith reported in Sunan ibn Majah, 1944, briefly mentions the verse prescribing stoning for adulterers, recorded and eaten by a sheep. Scholarly perspective. Renowned tafsir works explain that the verse of Rajam was abrogated in recitation, Nask al-Tilawa, but not in ruling, Nask al-Hukm, which remains firmly supported by mutawatir hadith and practice of the companions. Cite, turn, search, 7 turn, search 69. Al-Suyuti and others note early sources like Ubay ibn Ka'b confirming that Surah Azab was once as long as Surah Baqarah and included the Rajam verse, now absent from the Mushaf. Cite, turn, search 12 of turn, search 7 turn, search 6. Ibn Kathir and Qurtubi, though not quoting these particular verses directly, consistently treat Nask as a pragmatic divine process, highlighting that some legal directives were revealed and later refined or removed while the underlying rulings remained intact. Cite, turn, search 7 turn, search 7 French fries. Summary of tafsir views, issue, revealed version, abrogated version, current status Munqaith. Summary of tafsir views, abrogated version. Adult breastfeeding, 10 known sucklings, reduced to 5 known sucklings, forgives marriage prohibition, ruling remained contextually applied. Verse of stoning Rajam, prescribed stoning, omitted from Quran, legal ruling preserved via mutawatir hadith. Final observations. Tafsir scholars see these incidents as examples of divine legislative process, not errors or loss, but intentional abrogation to refine the revealed guidance. The sensitive wording and chain of narration surrounding the sheep-eating story means scholars generally prefer the versions without it, or deem it weak and later added material. Cite, T-turn, search 6 turn, search 10 slime. Verses abrogated in recitation, tilawa, but not in legal ruling, remain foundational in deriving Islamic law, as seen in both breastfeeding and Rajam cases. Would you like excerpts directly from Tafsir ibn Kathir or Qurtubi on the broader concept of Nask? I can provide those too.